Welcome everyone to my channel. I'm Mama Atheist, but you can call me Amanda. Now, there are a few different sides to the climate denial debate. The first and most obvious are the outright repudiations of the existence of climate change. We've all heard that one, the ridiculous notion that climate change is a hoax and that 97% of the world's leading scientists are all apparently in on this hoax. I have a separate video tackling that topic. Today, we're going to discuss the root cause of climate change, and I hope to show you that human activity is the main reason that our planet is warming at a startling rate. One of the main go-to arguments climate scientists utilize when attempting to show the connection between human activity and climate change is to merely look at the data. As a scientist, I completely understand that correlation does not equal causation when attempting to prove a theory. However, with a mountain of empirical evidence pointing toward a simple conclusion, we can assess the data that we have and conclude that there is a relationship between human activity and our rapidly changing climate. So how then is the data surrounding climate change pointing toward a man-made cause? Well, let's break some of that data down really simply. To start with, the most obvious data point, global surface air temperature has been increasing for more than 150 years. Since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, when humans discovered they could harness energy from fossil fuels and began burning a fuck tons of it in order to further progress society, the average global temperature has risen 1 degree Celsius. Now, I understand that 1 degree may not seem like a big deal overall, but keep in mind that this is an average temperature for the entire planet. That means that there are places on Earth that are warming much faster with much higher temperature increases than the rest of the planet. According to the IPCC, or the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the strongest warming areas are happening in the Arctic during its cooler seasons and the mid-latitude areas during their warmer seasons. As climate scientists, we fear the dreaded 1.5 degrees Celsius temperature hike. We know that once our planet hits that mark, it may very well be past our point of no return. However, there are some areas on the planet that have already surpassed the more than 1.5 degrees Celsius temperature rise. In fact, more than a fifth of the human population lives in an area that has already seen this temperature spike. What that equates to is large spread areas of drought, destruction of local ecosystems that eventually spreads to wider ecosystems as well. The simple raising of global temperatures is destructive enough, but add in all the other effects of climate change, like changing currents and increased weather intensity, there is not a part of this planet that hasn't been affected by this phenomenon. As we know, the buildup of greenhouse gases in our atmosphere is what has accelerated climate change to the point that we are facing today. Greenhouse gases are essential to life on Earth and allow enough heat to become trapped within our atmosphere in order to keep the planet's surface habitable. However, as humans burn fossil fuels in order to create energy, these greenhouse gases begin to build up to intolerable levels within our atmosphere, trapping more solar radiation near the Earth's surface, increasing our average global temperature. If we look only at the carbon dioxide levels in our atmosphere, we see a significant increase in CO2 accumulation over the last 150 years. In 2019, the global average CO2 level reached 409.8 parts per million. When taking into consideration the fact that in the last 800,000 years, carbon dioxide levels have never surpassed 300 parts per million, this is an enormous increase. In fact, we have not experienced these levels of CO2 in our atmosphere in over 3 million years, when global temperatures were closer to 3 degrees Celsius higher than pre-industrial levels. Currently, that's a 40% increase in carbon dioxide in the last 150 years. And it's not just the level themselves, but the rate at which they're rising. In the 1960s, carbon dioxide levels were rising at a rate of about 0.6 parts per million per year. Between the years 2009 and 2018, the average rise in carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere each was about 2.3 parts per million. That is an enormous jump in the rate of rising CO2. Methane levels have increased even more, especially in the last 50 years. Since the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, methane levels in the atmosphere have increased 148%, and there is just no natural explanation as to why this is occurring. The simple question in front of us now is what could possibly be causing the exponential rise in greenhouse gas buildup in our atmosphere. On the surface, it's as simple as connecting A to B. Our global temperatures started rising significantly after the discovery of fossil fuels and the advent of the Industrial Revolution. Burning fossil fuels release greenhouse gases into our atmosphere, and these gases have nowhere to go. They build up, trapping heat near the surface of the Earth, raising global temperatures. These are facts, things that we can and have observed as scientists. However, regardless of how simple it may seem to connect the burning of fossil fuels to the raising of global surface temperature, many people still doubt that humans are responsible for climate change. For a long time, scientists didn't attempt to make a direct connection between the whys and hows of climate change. Starting in the late 70s, when the idea of global warming was first introduced to the public, scientists were merely observing how our climate was changing. The global temperature was rising, ecosystems were collapsing, severe weather was getting more consistent, and the absolute onslaught of effects caused by climate change left the scientific community struggling to keep up. We've watched our climate change much quicker than we could have ever possibly imagined. Even now, with a better understanding of the science behind it, we are still often way off in our predictions. It wasn't until 2004 when what is considered the earliest seminal study into the scientific consensus on what has caused climate change did most scientists in the field really start putting the pieces together. In this study, led by Naomi Oreskes, over 900 research papers on the changing climate were analyzed, and not one disputed the fact that humans are to blame for the rising global temperatures. 5 years later, in 2009, Peter Dornan and Maggie Zimmerman surveyed a worldwide community of Earth scientists, and their conclusion founded that 97% we like to point to today, as an astounding 97% of those scientists agreed that humans were the cause of climate change. Then in 2013, Australian scientist John Cook compiled over 20 years of climate research that encompassed any data regarding climate change among over 12,000 published papers. Only about a third of these papers hinted at any cause to climate change. However, of those third, once again, 97% pointed toward humans being to blame. Well, what exactly does this mean? See, part of the problem with distinctly proving that humans caused climate change is that we can't just capture some CO2 from our atmosphere and analyze it to find what produced it. There are no fossil fuel labeled greenhouse gas particles floating around. What we do have, however, is a consensus from scientists in the field who have analyzed the data and found the connection to be almost certain. Remember, during the time that humans have existed, carbon dioxide levels in our atmosphere have never surpassed 300 parts per million. We know there are certain events that change the Earth's climate naturally. In fact, in the last 800,000 years, our climate has changed 7 times. We know that orbital changes of the Earth can shift the climate. Even small tilts to the Earth's orbit can change the climate on the planet itself, and we tend to see these transformations occur when we shift either into or out of glacial periods. In the past 150 years, in the time we've observed our climate drastically change, we have not had any significant orbital shifts. Another cause of climate change is solar variation. Small changes in the sun's energy output can cause a warming or cooling period on the planet, much like the little ice age that occurred between the 17th and 19th centuries. While it is true that solar radiation began to increase slightly at the beginning of the 20th century, as you can see in this graph, it was not enough to trigger all the overall temperature increase. Volcanic eruptions are another natural event that can cause a shift in the climate. Volcanoes spew ash and other debris into the air, usually creating a cooling effect for a short period of time for the debris settles to the ground as solar radiation is blocked from reaching the surface of the Earth. As we know, no major volcanoes have erupted recently, and our global temperature is on the rise. Ocean currents can also affect climate. In fact, ocean currents are a major component of our climate system here on Earth. As you can see in this picture, the oceans are all connected by a system of currents, which bring warm and cool water to different parts of the globe, dictating the local weather patterns. Water is circulated around the planet through a combination of wind, tide, the Coriolis effect, which is the rotation of the Earth, solar energy, and differences in water density. This is an issue we face today. As the average global temperatures rise, so do the ocean temps. As water becomes warmer, the pH of the water changes along with its salinity, causing it to become less dense. Changes in density disrupt the circulation pattern in the ocean, altering the way the currents move. In the case of ocean currents, it appears that the climate change we are already experiencing is compounding the issue, creating even more climate change in the process as ocean temperatures rise and currents change. Lastly, internal variability is another natural type of climate change. To put it simply, these are just natural occurrences that are produced within the Earth system itself, such as variations in wind, El Nino and Arctic oscillations, and the natural production of greenhouse gases. Overall, internal variability only accounts for less than 0.3 degrees Celsius change in global temperature, which is only a fraction of the change that we have observed. So being able to look at all the natural reasons for the climate to change and say, none of these provide an explanation for why the global temperature has risen to where it is, and why the climate has changed as drastically as it has in the past 150 years, as well as taking into consideration the overwhelming consensus from scientists in the field, we can safely come to the conclusion that humans are to blame for climate change. I know that it's a hard pill to swallow for some, but that we have put ourselves in this mess, but we really need to just accept that fact and move forward to a solution. Because there is no one else to fix this but us. If we continue to completely disregard our planet's future by burning fossil fuels at alarming rates, steadfastly acting as if we have some spare planet to inhabit once we've utterly destroyed this one, we really will reach the point of no return and condemn each species on this planet, ourselves included. That's about it for today. I want to quickly welcome all my new subscribers. Thank you so much for coming. And also, I want to thank my Patreons. It's a new thing that I'm doing, so thank you guys so much. I am Mama Atheist. Don't forget, think critically. Bye.